welcome to this lesson. We've talked a lot about scope JavaScript. We examine global scope, function scope, and then block scope. And in this lesson, we are going to be examining code blocks. A code block or block statement is a group of statements enclosed within curly braces. So, just as this definition says that when we talked about what a code block is, it's simply a group of statements enclosed within curly braces. So when we are talking about code blocks, what we are simply referring to is that if we have something like this, let me just check this out. So, and then we have other things like code braces. Now, and then I can have, let x equals to 2, let y equals to 2. Now, you can see that this is a group of statements that I have together inside these curly braces. And this is what it means by having a code block in your code. So you can see that I have group of statements here. I have three variables here inside these curly braces. So anything that goes inside this opening and closing curly braces is referred to as code blocks. Code blocks are important for controlling the flow of execution and defining variable scope within a JavaScript program. Just as we've talked about scope in JavaScript, you see that code blocks, especially when it comes to function scope, you can see that it was that code block that gave us that protection in order for our variable not to become outside accessible when we declare that such a variable like that inside the function. So code blocks are important for controlling the flow of execution. To what it simply means in the simpler term is that for predictability and for control. So you can use code block to understand an idea of the behavior of how our program is going to behave or what it's going to do. Code blocks allow for multiple statements to be treated as a single unit. You see what I just did now? The body of a JavaScript function is always enclosed within a code block. It is that opening and closing curly braces. Code blocks are essential for if statements. So, when we are talking about if statements, code blocks are essential for it. For example, if I have if statement and here my condition, which I want to test, and then open my code block, I can put anything I want. Yeah, I say let x equals to 4, and then I want to have another something and say s. If s is not equal to 4, let x equals to, maybe like 7 or whatever. You can see that each of the control that I am adding to my if statement is also using that code block, which means that I am making use of the opening curly braces and the closing curly braces in order to control the flow of my program. Defining scope. Variable declared with let and const inside the code block and block scope, meaning they are only accessible within that specific block. So if I have a variable declared this way, and I have let x equals to 8. So this particular variable declared now is only accessible inside this my block scope. And if I don't have let, if I have another keyword like const, you can see it. So it becomes accessible inside this block alone, which is where I am putting the value of the variable. This helps prevent unintended variable overrides and promotes better code organization. So scoping in JavaScript prevent unintended variable override and promote better code organization because everything, especially variable, is scoped, which means that it has context where it can be accessed or context where it can be called or used. And this in turn prevents unintended variable override and promotes better code organization. Then we want to talk about standalone blocks. Code block can also exist independently without being attached to an if statement, a function, or a loop. Now, you will notice that we've been talking consistently about function with the opening and closing braces that we use to denote what a code block is in function. A code block is in JavaScript, but that does not necessarily mean that code block can not exist independently without being attached to maybe an if statement, a function, or a loop. This can be used to create a scope for let and const variable. And so to show us that our code block can stand independently without being attached to an if statement, a function, or a loop. Let's just quickly take a look at uh, this example. So I will take this out and make a fresh one. And before I do that, I want to change this because we are talking about code blocks in JavaScript. Code blocks in JavaScript. And then inside this now, let me make some very, yes, let me say y equals to 400. This is the second variable. And now I want to do, let's say I want to calculate an area. Let me just use a formula. Let me say x asterisk y divided by x. Now, you can see that here I am trying to calculate an area of two variables that I have earlier. And inside this code block, I can still get an output out for myself. And you can see what it meant by functions. Code block doesn't always have to be attached to what is it called, function, expression, or whatever it is. It can stand independently on its own as well. So now HTML equals the results of the linear. And now you can see 400. Now you can see if you take a look at this code, that this code is not like maybe I put it inside a function or I attach it to an if expression. It stands alone on its own inside this opening and curly braces, and this is what is meant by code block can also exist independently without being attached to an if statement, a function, or a loop. So the code I've just examined here is not attached to anything. It stood independently on its own, and yet we're able to get out and we are able to get out an output in JavaScript. So this is how standalone blocks of code runs in JavaScript, and then with let or with const, you can easily execute the output of whatever variable that you have inside such code block. Thank you, and in the next lesson, I'll see you.